The sun was blazing over the Okoye compound, but the heat in the air was nothing compared to the simmering tension in the courtyard. White canopies flapped softly above golden chairs, decorative flowers lined the walls, and waiters stood frozen, holding trays of untouched drinks. But no one was eating, no one was laughing. All eyes were fixed on the woman in the center, Talia. She stood tall, in a simple but elegant coral-colored gown, her fingers clenched at her sides, her chest rising and falling with restrained fury. Around her, a circle of relatives, dozens of them, stood like silent judges in traditional lace and gold agbadas. The Okoye crest gleamed on the family compound gate behind them, a symbol of wealth, control, legacy. And at the far side, perched like a queen on her wicker throne, was Mrs. Amaka Okoye. She must kneel, the matriarch said again, her voice calm but cutting like glass. Before this family accepts any woman, she must first prove she is humble enough to respect us. The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded, others simply watched. And next to Mrs. Amaka stood Chuka, Talia's fiancé, in a cream-colored kaftan, his hands folded, his jaw tight. Talia turned to him, eyes pleading for something. Protection, defiance, love, anything. But he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. It was a betrayal delivered in silence. Talia's breath caught in her throat. The walls of her chest closed in. She felt her pulse in her ears. A woman in the back whispered, "She should have known. She's not one of us." The compound grew quiet, so quiet she could hear the birds fluttering in the mango tree above them. Her eyes locked with Mrs. Amaka's. For a moment, something passed between them. Two women from different worlds, staring across the gulf of class, control, and pride. Then slowly, deliberately, Talia sank to her knees. The gravel dug into her skin. Her palms rested on her thighs. Her eyes never left Mrs. Amaka's face, but her head didn't bow. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Her spine stayed straight. Her gaze stayed strong. And behind her burning eyes, something was shifting, not breaking, building. "They thought they broke me that day," her voice would later say in a quiet narration. "But they didn't know. I had already started building my escape." The silence stretched until the air felt like glass, moments from shattering. And in that silence, a storm began to brew. 6 months earlier, the world felt simpler. Talia's apartment in Enugu wasn't grand, but it was hers. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, brushing warm light against mood boards pinned to her studio wall. Rolls of fabric leaned neatly in a corner, beside a desk cluttered with sketches, paint swatches, and coffee mugs filled with pencils. Every inch of the space breathed creativity and ambition. Talia moved through her home like a woman who had built it from scratch, because she had. At 29, she'd worked her way up from internships and furniture reupholstery gigs to running her own boutique design firm by Talia Interiors. Her work was finally getting noticed. A few mid-level real estate developers had started hiring her to stage luxury homes, and word was spreading. That was how she met Chuka. He'd walked into one of her showrooms with his business partner, sharp-suited and easy-smiling, his voice low and confident. He wasn't flashy, but everything about him, his tone, his posture, his shoes, whispered money. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, praised her vision, even remembered her assistant's name when he came back for the second meeting. Within a week, he'd asked her to dinner, and from there, it was a whirlwind. Chuka made her laugh. He listened. He made her feel like the most brilliant woman in the room. Late-night drives, weekend getaways, bouquets for no reason. Within 3 months, he proposed under a canopy of string lights in an art gallery he'd rented out just for her. He said he wanted a future with her, a real one, but cracks began showing even before the ring settled on her finger. When it was time to tell his family, Chuka hesitated. He said his mother, Mrs. Amaka Okoye, could be a bit old school, that she had very specific ideas about who was suitable for her first son. "She doesn't need to know your whole background," he'd said casually one afternoon over wine. "Let's just keep things simple for now." Talia blinked, confused. Simple how? You don't have to talk about your parents, or how your dad was a civil servant, or that you went to UNN instead of abroad. It just complicates things. It stung, but she let it slide. She told herself it was just the pressures of an elite Nigerian family, the kind she wasn't born into. And anyway, he loved her, didn't he? Love was enough. It had to be. The engagement moved fast, and so did the expectations. Chuka suggested she move to Lagos. "It'll be better for your business," he said, and she wanted to believe him. She left her apartment, handed over half her clients to a trusted assistant, and moved into the Okoye compound, a sprawling estate tucked behind high fences in Ikoyi. That was when everything shifted. The Okoye home was cold, not just in temperature, but in energy. Marble floors, staff in uniforms, expensive art, expensive silence. Mrs. Amaka greeted her with a tight smile and an eyebrow that never quite lowered. "You're not what I pictured," she'd said with a tone that tried to sound polite, but bled condescension. Talia was determined to win her over. She offered to help with the interior redesign. She complimented the family traditions. She tried to stay out of the way, but it was never enough. They never said anything outright, but every gesture was a needle. Small corrections. A new cook hired to replace Talia's homemade meals. Gifts returned. By mistake. Family meetings held without informing her. Chuka, meanwhile, began to withdraw. He stopped asking about her clients, stopped defending her. When his mother made cutting remarks, his phone stayed glued to his hand. The warmth in his touch started fading. "You're overthinking it," he'd say whenever she raised concerns. "You're just not used to a proper family structure," Mrs. Amaka had said one morning over tea, sipping slowly. "Women like you need to learn patience." Talia began folding into herself. She dressed more conservatively, cancelled clients, smiled when she wanted to scream. She tried to blend in, but the harder she tried, the more invisible she became. And the man she loved, the man who once told her she lit up every room, watched her disappear without blinking. Talia told herself this was temporary, that once they were married, things would get better, that sacrifices were normal. But somewhere deep inside, something was already starting to shift. Something heavy, something tired, something done. The Okoye garden was a portrait of luxury that morning. Marble-tiled paths winding through well-trimmed hedges, glass pitchers of hibiscus juice glistening on white-clothed tables, and the clinking of cutlery over grilled plantains and fish. The entire family had gathered for Sunday brunch, dressed in colourful Ankara and designer loafers, their voices weaving in and out of conversations about business, politics, and the upcoming engagement ceremony. Talia sat beside Chuka, quietly nibbling on fruit, carefully polite. She'd learned to keep her voice low, her thoughts guarded. But when Chuka's uncle, Chief Ifeanyi, began discussing plans for a new luxury housing estate, something stirred in her. He spoke about the challenge of differentiating the development from the dozens popping up across Lagos. "We need a concept, something that feels different but still screams wealth," he said, folding his napkin. Without thinking, Talia leaned forward slightly. "Have you considered incorporating wellness spaces into the design? A mix of modern minimalism and African textures, like clay mud spa rooms, sound gardens, local artisan furniture in communal lounges. Create an experience that feels grounded and exclusive at the same time." There was a beat of silence. Then, Chief Ifeanyi's face lit up. "That's actually brilliant." He chuckled and turned to Chuka. "Your fiancée has an eye. You should be using her on your team." A few people chuckled lightly, nodded. Talia flushed, not with embarrassment, but with pride. She caught Chuka's eye, looking for a flicker of support. Instead, he stared straight ahead, jaw tight. At the far end of the table, Mrs. Amaka set down her fork, carefully, deliberately. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely," she said softly. "We are truly blessed to have such creative opinions at the table." The air shifted. Conversations staggered. Chief Ifeanyi cleared his throat and sipped his drink. Talia swallowed her rising discomfort. She had only tried to help. Later that evening, while walking past the hallway near the main sitting room, Talia paused. Voices drifted from behind the half-open door. It was Mrs. Amaka and Chuka. "She's getting bold," the older woman said coldly. "Correct her now before she embarrasses us publicly." "She was just trying to contribute." Chuka's voice strained. "You know what they'll say, that you brought home a mouthy, untamed girl from a lower class, that she'll be dictating our family's business in 6 months. Do you want that?" A long pause. Then Amaka's voice again, quiet, but sharp. "If you don't tame her now, she will ruin this family's image. Do what must be done." Talia stepped back, heart pounding, her hands ice cold. The door creaked slightly, and she darted down the hallway, unseen. She didn't sleep that night. The words replayed over and over. Mouthy, untamed, ruin this family's image. The next morning, over breakfast, Chuka stood in their private dining area, not touching his food. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. "About yesterday." Talia waited. "You disrespected the family, my mother. Speaking out like that, it was inappropriate." "I was contributing," she replied, her voice measured. "Even your uncle agreed." He didn't flinch. "You'll apologize, today, in front of everyone." She blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Yes, it'll show maturity, humility. And if I don't," he looked away, "then maybe we're not aligned after all." Her breath caught. "Are you threatening to end the engagement because I spoke?" "No," he said. "I'm saying there are expectations here. If you can't meet them, this may not work." The words landed like a slap. She looked at him, the man who once swore to fight for her, to protect her, to build a life together, and saw a stranger. She wanted to scream, to walk out, to never look back. But instead, she nodded, because this wasn't a battle she could win with pride. "Not yet." "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll apologize." And so, the next day, the courtyard was filled, the compound called to order, and Talia, wearing a neatly pressed gown, stepped into the center. They thought they were teaching her a lesson. They thought they were putting her in her place. But in truth, they were only lighting the fire that would burn their whole illusion to the ground. That night, after the public humiliation, Talia didn't cry. She lay awake in the guest room that had quietly become hers, separate from Chuka's suite, since their engagement turned tense. The gold leaf wallpaper, the velvet curtains, the silence. It all felt like a cage lined with luxury. But inside her, something had shifted. The heartbreak didn't burn the way it used to. It froze. Not in defeat, but in calculation. She sat up slowly, reached for her notebook, the same one she once used to draft design ideas, and began writing. Dates, comments, events. Every time she had been corrected, dismissed, insulted. Every time a staff member rolled their eyes behind her back after speaking with a marker. Every time Chuka had changed. By morning, she had filled 5 pages. This wasn't random cruelty, it was strategy. Over the next week, Talia stopped reacting outwardly. She smiled more, played agreeable, cooked jollof rice even though she wasn't expected to, listened in silence as relatives made cutting comments about modern girls who think too much of themselves. But inside, she watched and learned. She noticed how every time a call came from the family's investment team, Chuka grew anxious. How he snapped at his younger brother when he asked if the company's partners were pulling out. How meetings were held more often, longer hours, shorter tempers. One evening, while helping Ife clear the dining room, Talia found a misplaced folder tucked beneath the seat cushion of a chair. She glanced at the front, Okoye Real Estate's holdings. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were charts, printed emails, and frantic notes about declining capital, stalled foreign partnerships, and a line that made her blood run cold. Potential value uplift from merger with Talia Interiors post-marriage. Her name, her company. She turned the page and saw more. Projected forecasts showing how her design brand would elevate the Okoye portfolio to attract wellness investors. The merger wasn't a proposal. It was already being arranged. Her work, her brand, her life, being absorbed without her knowledge. That night she waited for Chuka in his study. When he walked in, tired and distracted, she held up the folder. He blinked. "Where did you get that?" "You were going to merge my company without telling me," he scoffed, trying to appear relaxed. "It's just a proposal. I was going to bring it up after the wedding." "You're not serious." He exhaled and dropped into his chair. "Talia, this is business. That's what marriage is too in some ways. Sacrifice. Alignment." Her jaw tightened. "So, you're marrying me to fix a family problem?" He gave a small, cold laugh. "Why are you making this emotional? We're a good match. You bring creativity. We bring resources. This is how legacies are built." "You mean exploited," she said. His smile vanished. "You're overreacting. This is what marriage means. Sacrifice." She stood there, her heart pounding, but no longer in confusion, in clarity. Later that week, she was in the pantry, pretending to look for a spice she didn't need, when Aoife, the long-time housemaid, slipped in behind her. "You saw it, didn't you?" Aoife whispered. Talia froze. "Saw what?" "The truth. That they only bring women like you here when they're desperate. You're the third fiancé Chuka's brought. One ran. One was sent back. Talia turned slowly. What happened to them? Mrs. Amaka made sure they left broken. She protects the family name, not her children. Why are you telling me this? Talia asked, still unsure whether to trust her. Aoife glanced around before whispering, because I watched her do it before. I'm not watching her do it again. Eve's voice was lined with the kind of pain only long-time silence can breed. In the following days, Talia and Aoife began to share quiet exchanges. Aoife pointed out patterns, how certain calls arrived only when Talia left the room, how business guests were told she was resting, how Chuka's cousin had already introduced himself to developers as creative director of her company. Talia returned to her notebook. This time, she added screenshots, copies, photos. She started secretly transferring ownership of her brand to a trusted mentor in Enugu, changed password, froze unnecessary business account, pulled out of shared project. She said nothing to Chuka, nothing to Amaka. But inside, her resolve had solidified. Then came the final nudge. Mrs. Amaka called her into the parlor one afternoon. The windows were wide open, letting in filtered sunlight that made the room look deceptively warm. Talia, she began, her voice sugar-sweet. You've handled yourself better lately. Talia gave a tight nod. Thank you, Ma. Mrs. Amaka set down her teacup. Let me speak plainly. You were not chosen because we admire your background. You were chosen because you're useful. Your design business adds value. You understand? Talia's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. Amaka continued. The Okoye compound had never looked so grand. A white canopy stretched over the garden like a wedding veil, fluttering in the soft Lagos breeze. Gold chairs gleamed under the sun. Flowers cascaded down from pillars. A live band played soft highlife tunes in the background. Guests arrived in head wraps and gel, champagne in one hand, phones in the other. It was the engagement of the year, and Talia was the bride-to-be. She stood in the dressing room, wrapped in silk and sequins, her makeup flawless, her smile quiet. She had spent the last week moving like a ghost behind mirrors, smiling, nodding, accepting well wishes, while behind the scenes, she had executed a plan with the precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Her godmother in Enugu, Auntie Ifunanya, now held full ownership of By Talia Interiors. Every bank account tied to the Okoye deal was closed. Every NDA from real estate clients was pulled. Every thread they tried to wrap around her had been cut. Quietly, cleanly, legally, she had backed up everything. Texts from Chuka planning the merger, voice notes from Amaka warning him to tame her, financial documents forecasting how her brand would save their falling empire. She had it all, and today she would return it to them, not in silence, but in sound. As the priest stood before the guests, beginning the engagement blessing, Talia stepped up beside Chuka with a radiant smile. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. To anyone watching, she looked like the picture of a dutiful bride, elegant, graceful, ready. The priest's voice rose. As we begin this holy union between Chuka, Okoye, and Talia, Talia raised a hand gently. Please, sir, she said softly, before you continue, I'd like to say something. There was a murmur among the guests. Chuka stiffened beside her. Amaka's eyes narrowed. Talia turned to face the crowd, microphone in hand, dress sparkling under the sun. I want to thank the Okoye family, she began, voice calm and clear, for reminding me who I am. Whispers rippled through the compound. The band stopped playing. I came into this family thinking love would be enough, that humility, grace, and silence would earn me a seat at the table. But what I didn't understand was that this table was never built for women like me to sit, only to serve. Chuka stepped forward, his face tight. Talia, what are you doing? She didn't flinch. Let me finish. She turned slightly, handed a file to the priest. In this folder, she said, voice steady, are documents and recordings that show exactly why I was brought into this family, not as a woman, not as a partner, but as a strategy. Gasps echoed. Someone's phone camera went up. Others followed. She continued. Chuka arranged to merge my company into his cousin's firm without telling me. Mrs. Amaka warned him to tame me before I ruined their family's image. And all the while, they used my business name, my designs and my contacts to revive a crumbling empire. She opened the folder, pulling out a copy of the Okoye business proposal with By Talia Interiors plastered all over it. I was never the bride. I was the bailout. The compound fell into stunned silence. Mrs. Amaka stood, voice sharp. You ungrateful little… Talia looked at her calmly. Gratitude isn't owed to people who try to erase you. Chuka stepped forward again, trying to take the mic. This isn't the place. She pulled it back. You don't deserve my yes. The words hung in the air like a final bell toll. There was a pause, then flashes. Phones up, social media buzzing in real time. Talia turned, slowly and gracefully, and walked away, her engagement dress flowing behind her like a queen's cape. She passed Eve at the garden's edge, who gave her a soft nod of pride, past guests who whispered, My God! And, did you see that? She didn't look back. The music didn't resume. The ceremony didn't continue, because the bride had walked out, not broken, not begging, but burning with power. Enugu welcomed Talia back like a familiar breeze. Soft, familiar, honest. The apartment she had once left behind now felt like a symbol of freedom. Dust covered the furniture, old swatches still lined the shelves, and dried plants hung in pots by the window. But it was hers. No marble gates, no hushed maids, no performative love, just her. Within weeks of the dramatic engagement video surfacing online, everything changed. The clip of Talia standing in front of the Okoye compound, exposing the truth with calm strength, had gone viral across social media. People quoted her words. Brands reposted it. Women sent her messages from across the country. You gave me courage. I needed this voice. And with the attention came business. Clients who once hesitated to trust a young designer were now begging to work with her. International property firms reached out. Interviews were requested. Her inbox overflowed. But Talia stayed grounded. She expanded by Talia Interiors cautiously, hiring 3 new team members, all young women with raw talent and stories of being overlooked. She began leading design workshops and turned her Instagram page into a platform for not just beauty, but truth, talks on dignity, negotiation, and independence. One afternoon, as the sound of drills echoed from the back room of her new studio, the front door opened. It was Ife, carrying 2 suitcases and a tired smile. Talia rushed over. You came. I told you I would, Ife said. 11 years in that house. I think I've earned a fresh start. They hugged tightly, 2 women scarred by the same family, but free now, stronger, sharper, and unafraid. Talia offered her a role as studio coordinator. Ife accepted, without hesitation. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, the Okoye family scrambled. Mrs. Amaka hosted charity events and paid for glowing PR articles, but the damage was done. Chuka became a symbol of performative masculinity, a man who used love as a cover for convenience. Former partners pulled out of deals. Whispers followed him everywhere. He never publicly addressed the video. He didn't have to. His silence only deepened the shame. Months later, Talia stood backstage at a Women in Business summit in Abuja, watching the audience settle. When her name was called, she walked out in a bold crimson pantsuit, unapologetic, poised, free. She told her story, not with anger, but clarity. And when she closed, she said, respect is not something you beg for, it's something you own. And once you know your worth, no one, not a man, not a mother-in-law, not a powerful name, can ever take it from you again. The applause was thunderous. And in that moment, it was clear, her pain had bloomed into purpose. Talia's name wasn't just associated with design anymore. It was associated with dignity. Laughter and music floated through the air as guests sipped drinks and admired the sleek interior of Talia Interiors' new flagship studio. The soft lighting glowed off exposed brick walls and hand-carved wood installations, each piece telling a quiet story of resilience and rebirth. Talia moved gracefully through the crowd, dressed in a satin jumpsuit the colour of dusk, accepting hugs, congratulations, and compliments with a calm, grateful smile. Her eyes scanned the room, not for approval, but for peace, and she found it in every corner. Near the refreshments table, a young woman with box braids and oversized glasses hesitated before stepping forward. Miss Talia, she said, her voice barely above the music. Talia turned with a kind smile. Yes? The girl clutched her clutch nervously. I just wanted to say, I saw your video, the one from the engagement. You don't know me, but you saved me. Talia's smile softened. What do you mean? I was about to get married, to someone controlling, like Like him. My mother said I was lucky, but then I watched you, and I left. I chose me. There was a pause. Talia reached out, gently touched her arm. I'm proud of you, she said. The girl's eyes welled, but she laughed, embarrassed, and disappeared back into the crowd. Talia stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of that simple exchange. She wasn't just a designer anymore. She was a mirror for women finding themselves again. Later that night, when the party quieted and only a few guests lingered, Talia slipped away up the narrow staircase to the rooftop terrace. The city stretched before her, Enugu alive with movement and light, but for once she felt still inside. She leaned against the railing, wind in her hair, wineglass in hand, and as she looked out over the rooftops, a soft voice rose within her, full of memory and fire. They wanted me to kneel. I did, but they forgot. Some of us rise even from the ground, and Talia, once buried, now bloomed. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.